Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. I am here with the coach, John Brent.
And I'm here with the vet, Mr. Ian Griffin.
And we are at the Junk Talk. Oh, my. It's always good to be forward. I will say that.
Yes.
So, Coach, we're going to talk about something different. Now that all the NFL season's behind us and we're looking forward to the NFL draft, let's talk about the movement in the NFL of what it used to be and what it is now.
Yeah.
This last season, Matthew Stafford threw at least 5 games in the regular season for 300 yards. I don't even know he led it, but that's how many he threw at least. 6 games, excuse me, 6. And Dak Prescott threw for 5 for 300 yards at least. One of them was 450 yards, 440-something yards. Now I'm going to look at some data here. If you think about it, that's just one season. Let's see here. Roger Staubach, 6 in his lifetime for 300 yards.
Crazy.
Don Meredith, 7. Let's see here. Roman Gabriel, 7. Otto Graham, 7. Let's see here. Who we got here? Burt Jones, 8. Doug Flutie, 8. Jim Zorn, 9. Lynn Dawson, 9. And we get in here. Kenny Stabler, 10. Bernie Kosar, 10. Archie Manning, 11. Jim Plunkett, 11. And Darryl LaMonica, 11. Ron Jaworski, 12. Doug Williams, 12. Steve Bartkowski, 12. You sit here and you go, Fran Tarkenton, Joe Theismann, Troy Aikman, Mark Rippon, all 13. Although Troy Aikman threw 4 in the postseason also. Jim Hart, 14. All these big name quarterbacks didn't really throw a lot for 300 yards. And then you look at today's time, and if you don't have 300-yard games, then you're not even considered a decent quarterback nowadays.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because we're looking at the quarterback play of the 80s and 90s, and then we're also looking at running backs in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
It was a more of a balanced type of game back then.
Yeah.
Because looking at the top 10 that we're looking back, Peyton Manning, Marino, Favre, Warner, Fouts, Moon, Breeze, Montana, Bledsoe, Elway, Brady.
Yep.
Brady's the only one that's in there, and he has 34. Manning, Marino, Favre had over 60 in their career.
Wow. And if you remember back in the day, Marino and Fouts were considered gunslingers at the end of the day. But,
top guns.
Yes, top guns, but neither one of them won a Super Bowl,
Right.
And because it was considered, actually what it was considered is like in the 2000s, it was considered the same as a running quarterback would never get you to the Super Bowl.
Right. Had Donovan McNabb and Randall Cunningham in the, in the 90s and all that. But nowadays, there's a switch in the mentality of like a Lamar Jackson type or even, I'll tell you right now, a guy that played great this season was the guy from Buffalo.
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen. Now, he is, I'll tell you right now that he's changing the quarterback because he's a big guy that can throw the ball. He can throw it sideways. He can throw it over the top. But he'll run you over, and he can run around you. He was nifty a couple times, late in the season that got them, into the playoffs.
Well, for years we hadn't had the running quarterback, to be honest, until we got Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson was kind of one that, and I equated it to who's been in the Super Bowl. So Russell Wilson, but prior to Russell Wilson, when was the last running quarterback we had? Steve Young. And then prior to Steve Young, maybe a little Doug Williams, but it was really Fran Tarkenton and Roger Staubach.
And they were just not running down the field. They were running for their lives to make a throw.
Yeah. But when they ran, they did exploit you.
Yeah.
And whereas Russell Wilson opened up that game more,
but in our lifetime, when I consider the big Cowboys in the 1990s, the first quarterback I ever saw that was a running, throwing quarterback that really was like changed the game and was like, wow, was Randall Cunningham. When I saw Randall Cunningham from the Eagles play, he was never out of a play.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first time that I could, since the Staubach, Tarkenton running around and Roger the Dodger type mentality, but he could actually run down the field, run around you, throw the ball on the run. And then I think a lot of people started seeing that. And then when McNabb came around from the Eagles again, it was like, wow, this is kind of the new way of quarterbacks can play.
Yeah, and then you had Vic in there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those there, at the end of the day, it was, you get the big quarterback who could take a hit, who could get hit in the head and things of that nature. But we didn't have all these yards that we had nowadays, Coach, to be honest.
Yeah.
The yards that we have were minimum from a quarterback. Just remember when Dan Phelps was quarterback, you were lucky to have a quarterback that would have 3,000 to 4,000 yards.
Yeah, 3,000 was the mark. Then it was 4. Now it's 5.
Yes, now it's 5. And I venture to say, give it 4 years and it'll be 6.
Well, as much as they're allowing the receivers to get away with, they're not allowing the defense to play any kind of defense. You can't even rush the quarterback in full strength without worrying about touching their face mask, hitting them. You can hit them and not even drive them to the ground, and they let the ball go, and you get a 15-yard penalty. So, yeah, the offenses are just –
or the pass interference call. Just run as far as you can. Let me throw it short, and as long as you can convince the defender not to turn around, we're going to get the PI call every time. Ain't that right, Aaron Rodgers? Isn't that how you do things? So anyway.
A little bit of a switch. The reason that we're talking about this, we have to look at it, is running games were bigger in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s for sure. So if you look at the top 10 backs with 100-yard games, because that's kind of the 300-yard quarterback, 100-yard rushing, the top 10 backs that run for 100 yards, Emmitt Smith, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, all 76, 77, 78 games with 100 yards.
Wow.
And then you have Eric Dickerson, Jerome Bettis, Edgar James, Curtis Martin, Adrian Peterson, Fred Taylor, Naaman Thomason, 47. Every one of those guys, there's not one in the league right now that's even in the top 25, but as you see those names, those were all 70s, 80s, and 90s backs.
Wow. That's great. But, that was the football that they played back then. If you think of the Super Bowl that the Dolphins won when they went undefeated, Larry Zonka, they just handed the ball. They really didn't care how much he got because the defense was going to hold as long as he got some positive yards each time,
Well, now one of the things that somebody said the other day, watching the games are longer and longer now because you're throwing the ball incomplete, throwing the ball running out of bounds or whatever. The games were a whole lot shorter back then, even though the game was 60 minutes because you ran the ball, sometimes 2-1 running the ball over passing, and now it's 2.5, 3 times the one. And we watched the game the other day that I think Dak had 50 passes, and the other team had 46 passes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost 100 passes.
Well, it's not only the longer portion of it is the quarterback play itself, and you and I have talked this. Is used to, there would only be an audible like once and a half or twice and a half or something like that. It wasn't that frequent that you audible. Now you audible every play, and I attribute that to Peyton Manning. That's where it started. Is he came in and says, okay, I'm going to read what the defense gives me.
Right.
And
Omaha.
Yeah, and I'm going to call out of that. They run too high safety, or the safety sucks in. I'm going to call this instead. And so each play is audible. There's no play like – you remember when San Francisco played, when Steve Young was a quarterback, they scripted the first 15 plays.
There's a lot of teams that did that in the 90s and the 2000s. That just you're going to go – Andy Reid was one of those. Just had a script, first 10 or 15 plays.
We run the first 15 plays, and then once we get through all them, we'll adjust and figure out what we're going to run from there.
And well, I will tell you this, and not to be political when it comes to football, I hate doing that, but it is a little bit political. There was a time just 30 years ago where Doug Williams was a quarterback and Randall Cunningham came up where the black quarterback wasn't a thing. And it was just a known thing that a lot of people said it, not that it was known, but a lot of people said the reason that the black quarterback is not so much, it's a smart person's position.
Yes.
Well, you tell you right now, look at all the black quarterbacks that have played in the last 6 to 10 years. And like you said, almost every quarterback comes to line, sees what's going on. Yeah. They'll audible out of it directly what it is. And there's probably in the league right now 10 to 12 black quarterbacks that are running offenses that have to be. So it was not what was true, but it was just that thought process of you have to have this tall, 6'4", white quarterback that can just have this perfect throwing motion. And now you got Pat Mahomes throwing from all over the place. You got Josh Allen that can run, throw, and do all this. Look at Lamar Jackson. He's a running back throwing the ball.
Well, Russell Wilson's
but they're all calling plays.
Russell Wilson only like 5'10".
Yeah, and calling plays.
Yeah, and Drew Brees, he was there, but Russell Wilson, he's the epitome of everything against that. And
it didn't happen much because Chuck Noll called plays.
Yeah.
Terry Bradshaw said when the few times that he ever audibled out, It was like hell on the sideline as soon as that series was over.
Well, I think the Vikings way back in the day were like the only one that Fran Tarkenton actually drew the play in the dirt.
Doesn't surprise
you. And what did Fran Tarkenton? He took them to 4 Super Bowls, but he ran for his life in each one of them.
So one of the things I think that when we first started talking about the subject, do we really believe that the 70s, 80s quarterbacks were better quarterbacks? Because we kind of think of them that way, Hall of Fame type, Bradshaw, Staubach, Dan Fouts, all these Marino, Elway guys, or we actually have better quarterbacks now that can do more things like throw the ball down the field, throw those out patterns. And like you said, they're calling plays at the line. Are they better? What is your thought on better quarterbacks today or better quarterbacks in the golden quarterback era?
So there's 2 quarterbacks I'll mention that I think they improvise a lot. Okay, and it's Aaron Rodgers, and that is Pat Mahomes. Mm-hmm. I do not think Tom Brady improvises a lot. I think he reads perfect. I think he is the best we got he's the GOAT. But I don't think he's an improvising type quarterback.
No, he's not rolling out and having to just pick something.
Yeah.
He's got 1, 2, 3 in his mind.
And he's not going, hey, you, after 20 yards, if you're not open, come back this way and things like that. Whereas I do believe that happens with Aaron Rodgers and that happens with Pat Mahomes. Now, I think that happened all the time in the 70s and 80s. I think that happened with Roger Staubach.
Just go and come back if I get. Yeah.
You're going to run this play here, but if you're not there, you're going to come back to this.
If it breaks down, you got a spot you're going.
I think it happened with, and he was on a bad team, but I think it happened with Archie Manning a lot because he ran for his life.
Right.
And I think it happened with Fran Tarkenton. I think those 3 it definitely happened with. Is just go. If the play breaks down here, you just go get open.
Yeah.
And you see that with the Packers. That's all their plays are after the play is broke down.
He's he's what I consider to be the best of the best backyard quarterback.
Yes.
Aaron Rodgers, and even Pat Mahomes, when the play breaks down, that's when it gets fun. It's almost like when he takes 7 steps back, Mahomes, and he gets ready to release that. He's doing it, and he's great at it. But it's like he's not having fun. Yeah. When he gets pushed out of the pocket, it's like, all right, I'm in the backyard, and that's how Aaron Rodgers is. Just give me a spot. You just keep moving. I'm going to find you.
So let me throw this out there. Do you think that happens with Drew Bledsoe, that happens with Troy Aikman, or do you think that happens with Tom Brady? Not so much. Mm-mm. Not so much.
Troy Aikman was a step back, look one way, throw, look one way, not there, second way, throw, and get rid of it.
Yeah, and as Michael Irvin said, he said, I can run that route 10 times and I can close my eyes. Every one of them will hit my hands.
Yeah.
Every time, because that's how it was methodical.
And that doesn't mean that Pat Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers are better quarterbacks than Tom Brady and Troy Aikman, or vice versa. It means they're different kind of quarterbacks. They're different. It's like Lamar Jackson. People say will never win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay, but Lamar Jackson with the right talent around him is better than Trent Dilfer.
Yeah.
He's better than Joe Flacco.
Athletically,
he's better than Doug Williams.
Yes,
but. He needs to have a certain type. If he had the Ravens defense they had when Trent Dilfer was there, when Flacco was there, they'd win the Super Bowl.
So that brings up this point here. We're going to approach the draft and we're going to say this is the top quarterback, and we've all seen it. The top quarterback goes to the team and they don't pan out.
Yeah.
They never do. Because in my theory is, and I will give you a great example, Invincible, Vince Young.
Yeah.
He went to the Tennessee Titans. And he clashed with Jeff Fisher, and Jeff Fisher benched him.
Right.
Instead of exploiting him and playing him, they clashed. But what does a good franchise do? And people say, oh, you see these political arguments with a franchise. They go, well, he drafted a quarterback. They fired the coach because the coach wasn't going to conform and play the offense that is tailored to that quarterback. If you have a Lamar Jackson, you have to set your offense up for Lamar Jackson.
And Harbaugh has done that.
He has. You cannot have Lamar Jackson and expect him to go in and plan a Tom Brady style offense.
And I'll say it this way: you're 100% correct, because if Vince Young would have went to Andy Reid's team, Andy Reid would have brought him along the way he needed to be brought home. But imagine Pat Mahomes, as great as he is, imagine if he was drafted by New England Patriots and Belichick.
Imagine if he had went to Cleveland.
Yeah. Imagine if not just a place, type of coach.
Yeah.
Because Belichick is going to say, you're going to run my system the way
He would have handcuffed him down.
Exactly. But going to someone like Andy Reid for Vince Young and Pat Mahomes, and even for someone like think about who Andy Reid's had. I mean, he had some of those guys, McNabb. He had those guys that whatever their strength was, he went to that. Now, Jimmy Johnson, some of these quarterbacks couldn't have, Jimmy Johnson was my system guy.
Well, he was very much like Tom Landry.
Exactly.
Remember, Tom Landry set the great Roger Staubach. I mean, you'll play this play and he'll play this play type deal.
Right.
And you're like, what? And
I wish I could have that conversation with, I wish I knew that, because Jimmy Johnson and Troy Aikman are really good friends.
They are.
I would love to have that interview with them to go, how much did you audible and how much did you allow him to audible?
Yes.
I would love to hear that, because
that
I
would
don't
be
really
awesome.
know.
But you think about it, why do quarterbacks fail? Is it the quarterback's fault? Think about this. Who is the Browns quarterbacks over the last few years? That
they had many.
They had many. I can see one's face right now. And I can't
Johnny Manziel.
Well,
No,
Johnny Manziel's one, but Brady Quinn. Brady
Yeah.
Quinn was going to save the organization.
Oh my gosh, Notre Dame guy.
Yeah, if Brady Quinn would have probably went to Atlanta, or he had went somewhere else, we'd still probably be talking about Brady Quinn right now.
Yeah.
But he went to Cleveland, and they tried to make him into something he was not.
And another thing we got to think about quarterbacks is this, and we've seen it with Dak. We've also seen it with Pat Mahomes at the end of last year. Pat Mahomes literally was running for his life in the playoffs last year, winning games, but running for. And in the Super Bowl with that good defense they played with the Bucs the year before, he was throwing passes vertical.
Yeah.
And he started the beginning of this year running for his life again. They get the line in order. They get the defense, stopping people.
Yep.
And then he can be Pat Mahomes. But a line is just as important for a quarterback as anything.
I think when you see teams that draft a quarterback in the NFL, the teams that draft a quarterback good are teams that have either already had an offensive line or they're building the offensive line, and they give them some other ingredients out there. They put them into a system that has a good wide receiver. Several years ago, Josh Rosen was drafted, and my wife didn't like him because she said he was arrogant and pompous the way he came off, and I dropped a number 10. Well, Josh Rosen, he ain't really throwing the ball in the NFL anymore, But what I will say is, I can't remember who the other two that got drafted that same year ahead of him, but he walked in the best situation. He walked into Arizona with Fitzgerald and another receiver that was pretty good, a solid defense. So all he had to do is perform. The problem was he couldn't conform to that style of offense.
Yeah. And another thing we have to look at, you're talking about the quarterback, you're talking about the organization, we talk about the line, but the offensive coordinator that's calling the plays is huge too. We have a quarterback in Dallas with Dak Prescott. There's been times that I have felt that Dak Prescott, I've always said that Dak Prescott to me is not a Super Bowl winning quarterback. What that means, and that doesn't mean he can't win a Super Bowl, that means that Dak Prescott is not going to put a team on his back and be, a Pat Mahomes or somebody that just takes them to the Super Bowl. But what they've done to Dak Prescott is sometimes they've played against his strengths. His strength could be RPO, could be getting outside, running, throwing those bootleg passes, getting outside. And they try to make him too much of, I'm just going to use it like a Troy Aikman type, let's just drop back and make a throw. Yes, he can do that, but that's not his strength. So Kellen Moore, his offense coordinator, at times looks great for Dak, but other times like, do you remember what quarterback you had?
But also I will say this is you'll see some other, and I can't spit them off the top of my head, but you'll see some quarterbacks that'll have 5 years in the league and really not done much, but they also went through 5 offensive coordinators.
Yes.
So they're learning a new system each time. And in college, they were running this system. And these 5 years, they're not running nothing like this system right here. And so each time they're running something different, but nothing like what they were great at, the reason why they got drafted, all of them trying to make them do this here. Yeah. And
it goes back to the system. It comes back to the coach, what they're allowed to do. Dan Marino playing for Don Shula would have been different if Dan Marino was playing for Chuck Noll.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's just the way it is. And Terry Bradshaw may be playing under Shula, and he going, hey, you can just do what you want to. He might have looked horrible.
He may have. Think about this is Willie Joe Namath. He was really only known for 1 year, and his stats sucked after that. And he went to the Rams, didn't do nothing, you know.
Well, remember when Aikman came in, because we're big Cowboys fans, he was beat to death this first year because they had a horrible line.
Yeah, and then they drafted Steve Walsh.
And then they started, exactly, in the supplemental draft.
Yeah.
And then they ended up getting that line set up, and Aikman got comfortable back there. But imagine this. Just think the great Troy Aikman, because I think he's a great Troy Aikman. Let's say he has the line of the Cowboys now or the line of the Chiefs last year, and he has to impose.
He would have more concussions.
Yes, and he would not be the great Troy Aikman.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with that. Is the line has a lot to do with it, and the system that you get in has a lot to do with it. If you look at quarterbacks now, one thing I'll say is, remember when Tom Brady went to Tampa, he asked for a lot. I mean, not monetary wise, but he wanted input on the draft.
Yeah.
And what did they draft? Lineman. Lineman
Right.
is what they drafted. He wanted input on that because he knew what it was. That shows the genius of Tom Brady, to be honest. And he had the credibility to bring that there, you know, so he could do that.
The last thing I want to say is, because I think I asked the question to you, what do you think, which generation is better? I will still say the 70s and 80s and mid-90s were better for one reason over any other. The way that the defense got to play the receivers, the way they got to hit the quarterback, the way they got to go after the quarterback, the way they could pull jerseys and really play defense, it's totally different now. So if you have what do you say, Matt Stafford had six 300-yard games, could you imagine these guys that we're talking about high up on this list right now, Dan Marino and all those guys, they would not have those. I mean, they would have super numbers now playing.
Think of, these were considered above average, but not extremely great quarterbacks during that time. These quarterbacks would excel. Archie Manning would excel right now if he didn't have to get hit all the time. 1 and 2 pass interference. Steve Bartkowski would excel, and those are just some of them that I think would have elevated their game a lot more, because they were kind of scrambling style quarterbacks to begin with. And if they would have got away with a little bit more pass interferences and things, they would have aired the ball out. Dan Fouts probably would have walked into a Super Bowl.
Just looking at this numbers right here, Kurt Warner had 52 games, Fouts had 51 games, Warren Moon had 49, Breeze had 44, and he played a lot up till recently. But then when you look down here, Kerry Collins had 31 games. These guys would have doubled these numbers if they'd have played now. Yeah. Just because 300 yards now is not, it's more like a 400-yard game. We had one just recently, a month and a half ago, in Cincinnati, a Cincinnati quarterback besides, what's his name?
Boomer
Esiason that did great. At 525 yards.
Yep.
It didn't even look like he had 525 until they showed the highlights. Like, my God, he had 500 yards.
Yeah, he just
How many 500-yard games would Marino, Elway, Favre, Warner, Fouts have against these defenses today?
I don't know. Well, the defense and the rules.
The rules more than the defense.
The rules.
I do think we have better defenders now, but they actually have to play a different type of game, so their skill level has to even be higher.
Well, you talked about a little bit that they ran more back then. So Lester Hayes with 13 interceptions.
I'm not getting into Lester Hayes because he's not in the Hall of Fame, and they want to say about some stick-em types issue. But Lester Hayes, Jack Tatum, Everson Walls not being in the Hall of Fame, we could have an hour on that. That's ridiculous
I agree.
Right there.
But think about 13 interceptions. He shut down part of the field, and he punched you. I mean, he was a very physical cornerback.
Can't do it anymore.
So this is the deal, is what would he have if you had the offenses that threw more nowadays? He would probably push 16 to 20.
Everson Walls.
Yes, Everson Walls too. And Everson Walls, he was timeless. He did it in Dallas, and then he went on the Super Bowl runs with Bill Parcells and the Giants. And how
is he not in the freaking Hall of Fame, dude?
I don't know.
I mean, I can understand a little bit of the Tatum because he was just kind of a mean guy.
He was assassin.
He was the assassin. Actually, Darryl Singletary, I mean, think about it. He broke him in half. But Lester Hayes and Everson Walls, to me, makes no sense.
None at all. With that, from the coach
to the vet.
Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned.